etc. What can I do to impact the world positively? It's very easy for us to feel despondent and then just take a backseater and hope for the best. The reality at the end of the day is that there is something we can do. In fact, it's not just a possible solution, it's something that we are obligated to do. And that's none other than providing our children with a sound upbringing and a good example. If we look at every major figure in our history that's impacted society positively, right? If we look at every major figure that's impacted our society positively and provided positive change, behind that individual, more often than not, I would argue 90% of the time, you would find behind that individual was a parent who had very high aspirations and provided the child with a good upbringing. We should never ever underestimate what that can do. We look at the likes of Imam al-Shafi'i, rahimahullah ta'ala, the likes of Imam Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah ta'ala, the likes of Imam al-Ghazali, rahimahullah ta'ala, the likes of Imam al-Nawawi, rahimahullah ta'ala, the likes of Imam al-Subki, rahimahullah ta'ala, the likes of Imam al-Ramli, rahimahullah ta'ala. Even current day or yesterday, more contemporary scholars, the likes of Sheikh Mustafa Sabri, the likes of Sheikh Muhammad Sa'id Ramadan al-Bouti. Wallahi, when we read their biographies, what stood out to me was every single one of them was motivated by their parents. Every single one of them had a parent standing behind them that had very high aspirations, very strong will, and tawakkul in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then provided them with a good upbringing. That's true for most scholars. We do get the rare case, the likes of Imam al-Suyuti rahimahullah ta'ala, who was an orphan, the likes of Ibn Hajar al-Haytami rahimahullah ta'ala, who was an orphan, and then divine intervention came through. We don't know, perhaps their parents did have high aspirations, but didn't live long enough to see their success. So what's imperative for us in today's time is to ensure that we have very high aspirations for our children and then to provide them with a very good upbringing. In fact, today, in today's time, it's more, we are obligated to do so, given the attacks on the morality of our children and given the attacks on the upbringing of our children. It's not only an optional thing now. It's not only, if I feel like it. It's a necessary step for us to take. And if we see the impact that these people had in society, the likes of Imam al-Ghazali, the likes of Muhammad al-Fatih, who conquered Constantinople, his mother, from a very young age, had this aspiration for him. The likes of Sheikh Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, who conquered Palestine. The likes of Imam al-Ghazali, on an intellectual level, who took on the Shi'i Batinis at the time, who took on the philosophers. And by the way, today we still use Imam al-Ghazali's works to understand philosophy. The first book he wrote was Maqasidul Falasifa, the aims of the philosophers. The second book, after his work was widely accepted, he then wrote the Tahafutul Falasifa, the incoherence of the philosophers. So on every aspect we see how the positive change that these individuals brought into society that was fueled by their parents' intentions, their parents' aspirations, and their parents ensuring that they have a good upbringing and a good education. Now the reality is that I don't think any individual who would argue against this, I don't think any individual who deny that he wants this for his child, but the many of us feel like, how do we get there? So Imam al-Ramli rahimahullah ta'ala, one of the scholars whom we just mentioned, a 10th century Shafi'i jurist, one of the most important Shafi'i scholars, because we refer back to his work till today, in order to know if any of the Shafi'i books contradict Imam al-Ramli's books, those views are put aside and his book is considered the preponderant view in the madhab. So this is a big figure we're speaking about. Imam al-Ramli rahimahullah ta'ala writes roughly 100 lines of poetry addressing the parents on the upbringing of their children. And so I'd wish to touch on 2 or 3 of these points that Imam al-Ramli puts forth for us to ensure that our children follow the same trajectory that the likes of Imam al-Ramli and others had. One of the first things Imam al-Ramli says, he says, أيضا وشغل شاغل قلب الصبي عن كل ما يوجب نقص الأدب. He says, be sure to busy your child, or rather the heart of your child. So here he uses the word وأيضا شغل شاغل قلب الصبي. He uses the word heart, قلب, which literally means heart. But the word قلب and intellect, the word heart and intellect is interchangeable given the context. So the commentators on this verse, they use both. They say the first thing you need to do, they tackle it from the intellectual side. Ensure that the mind of the child is busy with those things that are gradually developing his intellect. These are the commentators speaking. I'm just delivering the message. They say lack of focus and racing thoughts are detrimental to the development of the child's intellect. And this can be avoided by avoiding busying the child's mind with randomness, directionless content. Right? Whatever, these same ai are telling you, the child can't sit down for 4 hours with a book. The same ai they're not unrealistic. They tell you, no, they learn through play. They're learning through play. However, what their minds are being consumed with must be directed. You need to manipulate it in such a way that the mind is busy with something that's beneficial, that gets him thinking. Right? And then the commentators continue and they focus on the same word from the spiritual aspect. And they quote the likes of Imam al-Ghazali rahimahullah ta'ala, where Imam al-Ghazali says that whatever enters through the eyes and the ears are channels to the heart, and whatever images reaches the heart that pollutes the heart, it's almost impossible to eradicate after that. These are the words of Imam al-Ghazali. They didn't see the internet that we have today. Right? So from the spiritual aspect, they say, ensure that whatever enters the child to his heart, through his eyes, through his ears, are not things that are going to pollute his heart, because it's impossible or close to impossible to eradicate it once again. The beautiful point that Imam al-Ramli mentions here is what? He says, keep the child's mind or heart busy with those things that are beneficial, and kulli ma yujibu naqs al-adabi, because it's going to affect his character later on. If what's entering is pollution, if he's busy with every random thing, 30-second videos for 4 or 5 hours straight, what do we expect of the child? What do we expect him to make of his life thereafter? Right? So if what's entering is pure, and the development of his intellect is consistent and directed, you can expect good character. But if the opposite is true, then expect yujibu naqs al-adabi, that he will have very little etiquette and he won't necessarily be able to make anything of himself. Imam al-Ramli rahimahullah ta'ala continues, we've mentioned a list of scholars, the likes of Imam al-Subki. So I wish to perhaps just share Imam al-Subki's relationship with his father, before we continue with the words of Imam Ramli in his poetry. Imam As-Subki rahimahullah ta'ala says, his father would send him to Imam Al-Mizzi rahimahullah ta'ala. Imam Al-Mizzi was one of the great muhaddithun of the time and scholars of Rijal. And he sent him to Imam Al-Dhahabi at the same time, who was also a scholar of hadith and a leading scholar in the science of Rijal. One day, Imam As-Subki, the son is Subki, the father is Subki. The son is Tajuddin As-Subki, the father is Taqiyuddin As-Subki. The son would go to Imam Mizzi, and he's relating this in his autobiography. He says when he comes home, his father asks him, what did you learn from Imam Mizzi today? He couldn't fool his father. Taqiyuddin As-Subki was one of the leading scholars of his time and the chief judge. Right? So his father, he couldn't. So he would ask his son, what did you learn by Imam Mizzi today? And then he would go to Imam Al-Dhahabi the next day and he would come back, what did you learn by Imam Al-Dhahabi today? Right? Which beautifully demonstrates to us, gives us insight that his father was very up to date with his education. Right? Not just, he's going classes somewhere. Right? I'll see the report at the end of the year. Every day when Imam As-Subki returned from class, his father would ask him, what did you learn today? And challenge him on his understanding. Right? Then Imam As-Subki says, his father never allowed us to sleep the last third of the night. His father would wake me up as a young child and say, even if you're going to play, you're not going to sleep this last portion of the night. Because I don't want it to become a habit of yours that you can't wake up at this time. This hour before Fajr. This hour and a half before Fajr. Imam As-Subki's words himself. My father would never allow us to sleep the last third of the night. He would wake us up, him and his siblings, and say, even if you're going to play around, but you're not going to sleep this hour. A father that was involved in his child's education, and not only education, but his spiritual upbringing as well. Right? Imam As-Subki says when he would come back from Imam Al-Dhahabi, we would go to Imam Al-Dhahabi, he was very happy because Imam Al-Dhahabi was a very approachable person. When he came from Imam Mizzi, he wasn't too happy because Imam Mizzi was an unapproachable person, a very stern person. And for a child at that time, which just gives us insight to that. They were normal human beings like you and I. Imam Al-Ramli rahimahullah ta'ala continues and he says, after focusing on the heart and the mind of the child, he says, وَيَحْتَفِظْ بِهِ عَنِ الْجُهَّالِ وَكُلِّ أَهْلِ الْفِسْقِ وَالضَّلَالِ وَمَنْ عُرِفْ بِالْكِذْبِ وَالْخِيَانَةِ وَكُلُّ مَنْ لَيْسَتْ لَهُ أَمَانَةً. Protect your child from every sinner, ignorant, treacherous, liar. Any individual who has these characteristics, not let your child spend time with him. فَإِنَّ أَصْلَ أَدَبِ الْأَخْيَارِ حِفْظُ الصَّبِيِّ عَنْ صُحْبَةِ الْأَشْرَارِ. He says, the secret, and this Imam Al-Ghazali rahimahullah ta'ala mentions as well, he says the secret to the upbringing of your child, he says the secret of the saints, of their upbringing and how they see to the nurturing of their children is what? حِفْظُ الصَّبِيِّ عَنْ صُحْبَةِ الْأَشْرَارِ. They never allow the children to spend time in people who are involved in sin. Straight out. Let's call a spade a spade. Right? Anyone who's involved in fisq, who has jahl, who's involved in lying, treacherous, whatever the quality may be, never allow your child to spend time in those people's company. Why? إِذِ الطِّبَاعُ تَسْرِقُ الطِّبَاعَ. Our nature, we steal from one another. You rub off on me and I rub off from you. وَقَدْ أَتَى نَصٌّ عَنِ الرَّسُولِ بِأَنَّ طَبْعَ الْمَرْءِ كَالْخَلِيلِ. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he quotes the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam who said that your character is that of your companion. Your character is that of your companion. If you allow the child in company that's not beneficial, what do we expect? We're going to pour filth in a glass and expect milk to come out. Right? So the second advice of Imam Al-Ramli rahimahullah ta'ala is what? Protect the children from company that's not beneficial. He continues and then he addresses you and I as the parents. And he says, "O you father, O you mother, who has not yet rid himself of bad habits and sin, at the very least, he pleads to us, at the very least, do not commit those sins in front of your children. At the very least, if you cannot rid yourself completely from sin, irrespective of what it might be, at the very least, do not commit the sins in front of your children. Your child needs to see you as the father and as the mother in the best light as possible. You don't have to be the most knowledgeable person. We don't have to be the most strongest person. We don't have to be the most wealthiest person. But my son needs to see me as an upright person. So no matter what the sin is that I struggle to rid myself of, no matter what the bad habit is that I struggle to rid myself of, at the very least, Imam Ramli rahimahullah ta'ala says, do not commit those sins in front of your children. So after the intellect and the heart, after ensuring that he has good company, after ensuring that you only display good character to your child, he leaves one last advice. And that's what? That's dua. Ultimately, everything that we implement, everything that we wish to steer the child in a certain direction will only come into fruition through the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One of the Sheikh Murabit al-Hajj rahimahullah ta'ala is quoted to have said that when they asked about the upbringing of his son, who's also a great scholar, he said that his tarbiyah of his child was dua. Rabbahum bid-dua. His tarbiyah of his child was a dua. So after we have stressed and exhausted ourselves in ensuring that the child gains the good education, the good companionship, and that you display good character, last but not least, you need to make dua for the child. Dua for our children needs to take preference over dua for anything else or anyone else. And if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees our sincere efforts, and we are consistent in our efforts and consistent in our du'as, certainly Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will accept. Imam al-Ghazali is Imam al-Ghazali because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose him to be Imam al-Ghazali. Imam al-Bukhari is Imam al-Bukhari because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose him to be Imam al-Bukhari. The times are different, the challenges are more, the distractions are more, but the same Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exists. We need to, as parents, have very high aspirations and ensure that our children are in good company, receiving a good education, and insha'Allah, the need of the time, the challenge of the time could be seen to and solved with the next generation of our children. بإذن الله تبارك وتعالى وبهذا القدر نكتفي وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين سبحان الله وبحمده سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. I was just asked to make one announcement that Sanzaf is outside, so we can visit the table after Jumu'ah, and that they are selling diaries. We can visit and support the organization بإذن الله تبارك وتعالى وبهذا القدر نكتفي. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.